Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, a show where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. Today's guest is someone who doesn't just talk about scaling and exit, he has lived it. Alexis Sikorsky is an author and a strategic advisor to owners who are interested in scaling fast and exiting. We're going to be talking to Alexis about his book, Cashing Out, and also about how he was able to successfully scale and exit his Switzerland-based software company, New Access. So we're going to be talking to him about how he transformed from operator to advisor and is now helping owners who are interested in scaling and exiting. So Alexis, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Curtis, for having me.
Why don't you start off by telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Born and raised in Geneva, Switzerland. I was always an entrepreneur. Like I started my first company when I was 15, export-import company out of my parents' garage. I think they still haven't forgiven me about this one. But I was always an entrepreneur, and up to year 2000 when I started bespoke internet development company that very quickly in 2003 turned into a banking software company that I grew through easy and hard times, right? Because in between we had the global financial crisis, which really didn't help us as a banking software company. But long story short, in 2015, we got acquired by a private equity. I stayed on board up until 2019, where I end up selling the remaining of my shares to the same private equity and left the company. After that, I took 3 years of retirement. And after that, I went to do an executive MBA at Oxford here in England and started meeting entrepreneurs. And, meeting and talking to entrepreneurs, I was like, shit, they're making the same mistake I made my whole life. So basically, I started a very teeny tiny advisory practice to help entrepreneurs basically not make the same mistake I made.
Well, talk about, because as you said, you did a 9-figure private equity exit. So talk about the part of the process that founders romanticize and the part of it that they underestimate.
So many. Well, first of all, I think the biggest mistake founders make is thinking private equity is the enemy. That's very, very common because private equity are very good at lots of things, but they're really not good at communicating well what they do. So they tend to think that, a private equity is going to come buy my company and it's going to be an absolute shit show and it's going to be a nightmare. And they see private equity as the enemy.
Well, at what point did you realize that New Access wasn't just a new business that you was building, but it was an access that you were going to eventually exit?
Exactly, I would say an hour after the private equity came and visit me. And that's one of my biggest mistake. I was absolutely not ready for a private equity exit. I was not even considering it, to be honest. When they came, it was like 5, 6 years after the global financial crisis. And I've been through 5, 6 years of like proper grind, really like not nice, not pleasant. And I was not ready. I was like, The conversation went actually very weird with the private equity, and I've been super lucky to be approached by good guys actually. What happened is they came, and at the time they came, the company was, let's say, back to break even after 4 or 5 years of proper losses. But when I say proper losses, I was to the point where I literally had mortgaged my house and I was in a very bad situation and I was exhausted and I still don't really know why, but choose to be strictly honest with the private equity. And they came and I said, listen, I appreciate you coming. I'm exhausted. I'm really ready to sell, but I cannot sell right now because my company is just break even. We have no value in the company. So I said, I'll make you a deal. I promise you that if you come back in 2 years, I'll back to profitability, and then I'm not going to go through a whole process and everything. You make me a decent offer, and I sell to you in 2 years. And they say, yeah, thanks for sharing. That's interesting, but we're not going to do that. We're going to do something a little bit different. You're going to go back home. You're going to do a business plan. You're going to tell us exactly where you think you're going to be in 2 years, and we're going to talk. I said, okay, I did that. I made well, very optimistic business plan. And 2 years, and a week later, they came, they look at my business plan and they say, okay, so we're going to buy your numbers in 2 years. We're going to buy 11 time EBITDA in 2 years, but we're going to pay you right now. We're going to give you 85% cash and 15% earnout.
We'll talk about, you often talk about how owners are weighed down by their own business. So, what are the first signs that a owner is stuck in operator mode instead of CEO mode?
Ah, that's super easy. Um, it's always part of the very first conversation I have with my clients. When I meet a new client, um, that's the first thing. Well, not the first thing, but it's one of the first thing I evaluate. Right? Basically, the way I put it, because I'm a little bit blunt. Okay, what happened if you leave? And I'm a scuba diver, so I use this example. You go on a dive trip, you're going to spend 3 weeks on a boat that has no phone and no internet. What happened to your business? Most of them say, oh, yeah, no, that's really not going to be good to the business. And you have a few who say, oh, no, nothing's going to happen. I say, okay, perfect. So you're leaving on Monday. I'm going to actually buy you plane ticket. You leave for 3 weeks and see what happens. So far, none of them actually took me on that offer. So basically, if you leave for 3 weeks and your company completely crashes or like get in lots of difficulty, then you don't have a company. You have a job, basically.
Well, talk about the apex process. Walk us through the process and talk about what stage owners often get wrong. Assess, plan, the execute, or the exit stage.
So the Apex methodology is designed for company who wants to get to an exit. That's the first, like, very important point. It's a big distinction between a lifestyle business and a growth business. And I value both, I respect both, but on the lifestyle business, I basically bring no value because it's all about operation excellency and tax optimization, which are stuff I'm not expert of. So the apex is basically, first of all, and to answer your question, the one that most of them get wrong is they don't assess their company, like basic stuff, exactly that. What's your goal? Are you a growth business or are you a lifestyle business? If you're a growth business, you cannot behave like you're a lifestyle business. And that's conversation I have with my clients all the time. Give you a super simple example, right? If you sell your company, you're going to sell 10 times EBITDA, give or take, right? So every time you take $1,000 off the company one way or another, it's 10,000 you're not getting when you exit. So if you start seeing founder that has like his holidays, his cars, his nephews, everything on the company, then it's probably not acting as a growth business because that's super inefficient. Also, you need cash to grow because you need M&A. And when I start working with clients, I always tell them like cash is my ammunition. So they don't assess the company well. Do you have your right number? Like, do you get a monthly financial analysis that once it's monthly and not quarterly because quarterly is too late. And if it's 50 pages that you cannot read, it's useless. Do you have the 10, 15, 20 numbers you need every month to actually run your company? Do you know what your unique selling proposal is? What's your USP? What makes you different from other company? What's going to allow us to grow? Do you know your market? Do you have an M&A strategy? Like, what are you buying? Do you measure your client satisfaction? But really measure your client satisfaction, not send bullshit forms that say, "Oh, I have 9.5 after 10 client satisfaction." Do you actually sit with your client and talk to them? So all these assessment is part of like assessing the company. It's usually what they do wrong, and often they just they don't do it wrong. They just don't do it at all.
Well, there's a lot of noise around private equity. So talk about the biggest misconception that founders have about private equity buyers.
Okay, so there is two big misconception in my opinion, and I've seen both of them very often. The first one is, oh, if I sell my company, I will not remain control. No, you won't. You sold your company. So that's like, I think you English speaking people call it have your cake and eat it or something like that. Like you have to realize that if you sell your company, you will lose control of your company. If you don't accept that, then don't sell. And I see that it seems ridiculous, but I see that all the time. Well, I'm super pissed. I sold my company. I retained 20% of the shares, and now the private equity does not let me run my company the way I want it. Yeah, no, they don't because it's not your company anymore. It's their company. It's like being unhappy by the way the guy who bought your car drives the car. It's not your car anymore. It's not your problem. And when you understand that, then you understand that your job completely changes. So you were the boss, you're now an employee. You need to accept that. Again, if you don't accept that, don't sell your company. But now you're two things. You're an employed CEO, which means you have to report to the private equity, but also you're a minority shareholder, right? And that's when you understand, if you're smart and if you choose a good private equity, that your goals are actually very aligned with the private equity goals, right? Because they are majority shareholder, you are minority shareholders, and you have the same goal, which is increasing the value of your shares.
Well, let's talk about boardroom negotiations. In boardroom negotiations, what gives a founder real leverage and what quietly weakens their position of negotiation?
Oh, that's a long and important topic. First of all, you have to understand something is private equity changed the life of founders. Like if you go back 20, 30 years ago, like before the boom of private equity, you were a founder of a small to mid cap company. I'm not talking, and I'm never talking about the billion dollars company because that's a universe I don't know. But you have like, a 10 million, $20 million revenue company and you want to exit. So basically, your only option at the time is a strategic exit. So you're negotiating with what? If you're a tech company, you're negotiating with Apple, with Microsoft, you're negotiating with Giant. And there is one Apple, one Microsoft, and 50 companies that do what you do. So you're in a very, very bad negotiating position. Thanks to private equity, well, now the situation is a little bit reversed. There is a million private equity who are in position to buy your company, and there's not that many of your companies. So first of all, you are in a better position to negotiate than you think you are. That's the first step. It's super important. Understand you're in a better position than you think you are. Then what makes you strong? It's lots of things actually, and all of them important. First of all, private equity are fantastically good at trying to obfuscate what they do, trying to make a very simple business very, very complex. So they will inundate you with technical jargon and they will start talking about mezzanine loan and about lots of three-letter acronym that you don't really understand, and they're gonna make you feel you're unimportant and you're not knowledgeable, and they are very important and very knowledgeable. That's literally like you buy a private equity to English dictionary. It takes you 15 minutes to understand what they're talking about, and you come prepared. That's super, super important. And then you're much better in negotiating when you understand what a private equity is. Private equity is very, very, very similar to real estate, actually. People think private equity is similar to VC. They are wrong. It's very, very different from VC. It's very similar to real estate in the sense that it is strictly a leverage play, right? The private equity is buying a company that does 10 million EBITDA. They're going to pay it 100 million. They're going to borrow 75 million, put 25 million cash. It's purely a leverage play, right? So basically, unless the company goes bankrupt, the private equity will always win. And while you understand exactly how they operate, you're much better in negotiating. Another, like it's a bit technical, but it's super important. Understand what they bring to the table. And that in my case, for example, to go back to my experience, um, so as I said, they offered me 85% cash and 15% earnout. And at the point I was like, okay, I'll take the 85% cash and the earnout I'll probably get zero. I end up having more, getting more from the 15% earnout that I got from the 85% cash, because actually I didn't take into consideration what they're building to the table in terms of knowledge, in terms of staff, in terms of network, in terms of everything. So while you understand and anticipate that, it make you in a better place to negotiate. Very concrete example, the private equity will pretend they will buy a multiple of your EBITDA. It's not actually the truth. They buy a multiple of something they call the nominal EBITDA. So that's something they calculate, and but they don't talk to you about it. It's something they calculate. In a back room, I give you a very simple example to understand what a nominal EBITDA is. You fire somebody in November. In your EBITDA, you have 10 months of his salary. In the nominal EBITDA, you have zero of the salary. So the nominal EBITDA is basically what the company, everything else being equal, could be doing. And that's what they're buying. So I never, for one of my clients, go see a private equity without a calculated nominal EBITDA, because now they know, like I know what I'm talking about. There's multiple examples of how you get prepared. Another way of preparing, super, super important, is do you due diligence on the private equity. I'm absolutely amazed that like people find completely normal that private equity does a 6 months due diligence on your company, but you're not going to do even 1 week of due diligence on the private equity. It makes no sense.
Well, many companies grow revenue, but they also grow complexity. So talk about the difference between scaling fast and scaling intelligently.
I don't think there are opposites. I think you can scale fast and intelligently, but you can also scale slow and being stupid. So it's all about transitioning, right? And that's actually it's going to be the topic of my second book. Company reach a tipping point at some point somewhere between 5 and 20 million revenue, where everything that was an asset up to there is becoming a liability. Give you an example. You as a founder, you're a fantastic asset. Like you know all your clients, you know your product better than anybody. You know everybody in the company. You don't need any kind of processes. Like you know everything. But suddenly you reach a point where that actually becomes a liability. And you need to start processing your company, start having the right people, start having the right structure in place, start having the right methodology in place, etc. So it's all about transitioning from a like bona fide one-man show, if you want. You can have a one-man show with 20 employees, but at the end of the day, we go back to that. If you making all the decision is everything goes through you, at some point you become a bottleneck. And also you're probably not as good as you think you are. And that was very, very clear for me. Like every day was a prototype for me because every day while the company was growing, it was suddenly running the biggest company I ever run in my life. So you get to, whoa, that's complex. I'm not used to do that. I need help. So at some point you need to realize that, yeah, you need help and you need the right people around you to help you.
Well, a founder builds something for years, then they exit. So talk about the psychological aspect of what happens after the shift and how can owners prepare for that shift.
This one I can only talk about my case and the few cases I'm working on, and I get all my founders prepared to that. Founders and entrepreneurs in general are a very different kind of beast, in my opinion and in my experience. A lot of founders are mentally different. Lots of us have ADHD. I noticed that like at least half of the founders I met have ADHD. We are a bit crazy, massively attracted to risk. A lot of founders are gamblers. I'm not, but a lot of founders are also gamblers because we like risk, we like high paced, we like adrenaline, we thrive on adrenaline, right? Because if you don't have this quality, you usually don't become an entrepreneur because it's a shitty job. It's like it's long hours, very low money. It's not a good job unless you really like are cut for that. So basically, you live in high octane, high paced world, and live in a world where basically you're the center of everything. You have a very strong, social position. Your phone is ringing all the time. You have lots of friends. You're an important person with like, if it was video, you'll see all the air quotes around that, right? I'm not taking that seriously, but it's your day-to-day life. If you sell to a private equity, you transition a little bit out of that because you're still very much in the center. You're still the CEO. So now you have a boss, but your boss is not going to be day to day with you. And if you sell to a strategic, basically from one day to the next, you're out, right? You're out of a job, you're out of your social position, you're out of having the phone ringing every 5 minutes. So two things happened. First thing is I will remember that moment all my life where the process of selling your company, it's a 6 months process, right? And a 6 months process to culminate to one moment, or at least for me, it was one moment. You end up in a boardroom, you have lawyers and advisors, and you have 20 people in the room. And at some point, in my days, it was a fax. Now it's probably on your cell phone. You actually see the money on your bank account. And that actually conclude the sales. After that, all the rest is admin, right? But at that point, you actually sold your company. And for me, the feeling like I was running this company for 19 years, and the feeling is literally like an immense weight was lifted from my shoulder. And I came home, and people imagine, oh, you must have partied like crazy. I went home and I literally slept for the first time in my life. Like entrepreneurs don't sleep. Like you sleep with one eye open, and for the first time I slept. And after that, yeah, you need to be a little bit psychologically prepared that your life is gonna change a little bit. And you have to be careful of one thing. A lot of exited founders do that mistake is they think that the skills and recipes that brought them to here make them super good candidate to start something new. And in lots of cases, I want to say most cases, but I don't have enough data to support that. But in lots of cases, that for sure, the next venture is going to fail. And the reason it's going to fail is actually you changed. You changed as a founder. And for me, it was very, very clear. Everything I tried after that failed because when you start a company, you have very, very specific skills. And for example, one skill is to look at small numbers. And when you run $100 million company, you don't look at small numbers anymore. You look at big numbers. And when you start your new venture, suddenly you need to go back to looking at small numbers. And for me, it was too hard. It's like, I don't care. The $5,000 difference, I don't care anymore when I should have.
Let's take a quick break.
In Kansas, blind vending operators are vanishing without a trace. No bodies, no witnesses, only silence. Detective Michael Miguel thought he had seen everything, but this case pulls him into something far darker, a web of institutional corruption so deep it was never meant to be uncovered. When vulnerable blind people disappear and bureaucracies close ranks, one question remains: who will fight for justice? As Miguel digs deeper, he uncovers a conspiracy reaching the highest levels of power, a system that exploits the very people it was designed to protect. The truth is buried in paperwork, hidden behind closed doors, guarded by those who have everything to lose. Some conspiracies hide in plain sight. This one hides in the dark. Iron Cane Media presents The Blind Conspiracy, written by Mikhail Battles Sr., available now on Amazon.
Well, I know that CEOs are, real good at diagnosing business issues. So talk about the patterns that come up again and again when a founder says something feels off.
Exhaustion. Like, not new age exhaustion, right? Not like, oh, I want work lifestyle balance because I'm old school, so we didn't have work lifestyle balance. We were working 20 hours a day and trying to survive on 4 hours sleep. We didn't have a work lifestyle balance. But exhaustion in the sense that more and more people rely on you while the company grow, and that's true for staff, that's true for clients, and you end up taking millions of decisions every day, and every single one is urgent. And you get to the point when you start confusing what's urgent with what's important. And that's the biggest mistake. That's the deadliest mistake because you get like drawn in day-to-day decisions that are very urgent but utterly unimportant. And you spend most of your time doing that and you forget what's your goal. You forget like where your company is going. You forget that your job is actually to have the vision. Your job is not to solve client issues or solve like fights in amongst the staff and all that stuff that you end up doing. Another way of putting it is you very, very easily tend to be too much in your company and not enough on your company.
If there's a founder out there listening today that wants to start building towards freedom and wealth, what should they start doing different tomorrow morning?
So freedom and wealth are actually two different questions, in my opinion. Wealth is depends what you mean by wealth. So if you have family business and you think being wealthy is making 1 million dividends per year and live like that the rest of your life, that's very well. But when I talk wealth, I talk generational wealth. And I always talk about that with my clients. Like, what are you leaving to your kids? How much money do you need to stop working? And that's where money and freedom meet, right? It's what you number, what's the number you need on your bank account to stop working for the rest of your life. And that's what they should be starting working towards. What's the number and how do we get to that numbers? Because freedom, financial freedom at least, will happen when you sell.
Well, talk to the listeners about your books. Tell us what we can expect when we read them and where we can get them.
Well, you can get it on Amazon. That's pretty easy. What you'll get is, I hope so. So let me tell you why I wrote this book. Um, I was working with founders. My specialty is scale-ups, not startups. I'm not really good with like the one-man companies and all that stuff. It's not exactly my specialty. So with scale-ups, and I was starting to think, okay, so I'm like very much saying the same thing and seeing the same trends. So when you get the book, what we will get you is a simple methodology to get your company to a point where you can consider a credible sell.
Well, tell us about any upcoming projects that you're working on that listeners need to be aware of.
I'm working on actually two different projects. First, I created a small company that's called Nightscale. Because one of the things I noticed with when company reached that plateau that I mentioned earlier, between 5 and 20 million revenues, depending, three things tend to happen. One is what I was describing earlier, the founder's exhaustion and the founder starting to be a bottleneck. So I help with that, and that's actually a surprisingly easy fix. I always do the same while I get the founder to recognize they are part of the problem and the fact that they are stretched too thin is part of the problem. I actually make them do a little exercise that is very annoying. But you do that for a week. At the end of every day, you spend 15 minutes and you put on an Excel spreadsheet all the tasks you actually did in a day. Like, oh, I talked to the client, I talked to the staff, I did an Excel spreadsheet, I did a PowerPoint presentation, etc., etc. You list everything you did. And after you have a week of that, you identify the tasks that you are uniquely qualified to do, and you'll see it's way less than you think. Not the tasks that you don't have anybody to delegate to. That's a different question, and that's a different fix. But the task that you really like, I'll give you an example. Talking to you tonight is a task I'm uniquely qualified to do. That's something I cannot delegate. Even if I hire the best public speaker in the world, people want to hear my voice and not this guy's voice. So that's something I'm uniquely qualified to do. There are a few stuff that you're uniquely qualified to do, and the bigger the company, the shorter that list become, up to the way that you go to a publicly listed company. Basically, the CEO's uniquely qualified list is one item is talking to investors, right? All the rest he can delegate, and he does delegate a lot. So that's one thing. Second thing is I help them putting system and methodology in place. But the most important is one of the reasons you get stuck is you need proper C-level people, and you cannot afford proper C-level people, right? You need like your cousin who's been doing your accounting is probably a fantastic guy, and I'm not saying you need to fire him, but he's not a CFO. Now you need a CFO. Now you need to ask yourself questions like capital allocation, equity versus loan, how do I grow, etc., which are really questions for a CFO. But obviously, if you are $1 million EBITDA company, you cannot afford a full-time CFO because that's going to eat half of your EBITDA, right? And that's true for a CTO, for a COO, for a head of marketing, head of sales, etc. So what I did is I called the friends I've been working with for 30 years, either as my employees or my clients or people I met in Oxford, and I created a group of C-level people, and we go in companies and help them fix stuff, basically. So it's more like short-term thing. So that's one project I'm working on. And the other project is I'm writing my second book. And to write my second book, when I talk to founders and I say, oh, I think there is a plateau around 5 to 20 million. If somebody say, well, no, that's bullshit, it's fine because I'm in a conversation. But if I want to put something in a book, it better be true. So I'm spending a lot of time doing interviews of founders. I interviewed probably like 40 founders in that particular time of the company.
Well, so people can keep up with everything that you're up to, throw out your contact info.
Find me on LinkedIn. Honestly, it's the easiest. I'm lucky enough that I have a name that's pretty not very common, so I'm easy to find on LinkedIn.
Close us out with some final thoughts, maybe if there was something I forgot to talk about that you would like to touch on, or any final thoughts you have for the listeners.
No, just reiterate an exit, a proper private equity exit, also a strategic exit, it takes minimum 2 years. So start working on your exit way earlier than you think. And also always consider M&A. Like it's the easiest, fastest, and cheapest way to grow.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. So check out Alexis's books and keep up with everything that he's up to. Follow him on LinkedIn. Follow, rate, review, share this episode to as many people as possible. And visit www.curveball337.com to keep up with all things Living the Dream. Leave us a review, drop us a line with any suggestions or feedback for the show, and share the website and the show to everybody you know. Thank you for listening and supporting the show. And Alexis, thank you for all that you do. And thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Curtis.
For more information on the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, visit www.curveball337.com. Until next time, keep living the dream.